Hello and welcome to TelecomTV. I'm Martyn Warwick. We're here in London at the Great Telco Debate 2015 and I'm talking with Sanjay, who is Director of Product Marketing at Jasper. Sanjay, welcome.
Thank you, Martyn.
I'd like to talk to you a bit about IoT, the Internet of Things, if I could. And forgive me, the first question is a bit long, but I want to sort of set the scene, as it were. A major part of your job, your work at Jasper, is to make IoT services both a profitable venture for both operators and enterprises. So two sides to the coin. Given that IoT means so many different things to so many different people, given also that the sector is becoming more and more messy, more of a mishmash of ever more contradictory protocols, there isn't one overarching one, and given the absence of standards and regulation, how on earth do you go about fulfilling that remit to make it a profitable venture for those two different sides?
Sure. So let me start off by saying that I think the key fundamental of the promise of IoT is to take devices and assets that are fairly unipurpose and make them a lot more intelligent.
Right.
Which means connecting them to resources that are outside of their own periphery. So obviously connectivity is an important part of IoT. And you asked about the question about what it means to different organizations and the mishmash of different technologies. So first and foremost, what we at Jasper found was that just making sure that those devices can connect to get that extra level of intelligence that is in the cloud is in itself a payoff. So how do you go about connecting it? And of course, there too you have a lot of different methods of connectivity, different protocols. But one of the things that we found out very early on in Jasper is that, first of all, IP is ubiquitous, given that the internet is ubiquitous. And the cellular network is ubiquitous, particularly the GSM network. So what we did was we really focused on the cellular, as in the GSM-based IoT connectivity, if you will. And as a result, what we found is that there's a significant critical mass of companies that have gotten advantage of the fact that there is a quote-unquote standard, if you will, of at least getting their devices connected into a higher level of intelligence.
What a good answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Let's look at the manufacturing sector,
Sure.
one of the big areas where IoT is expected to play a major part. Many analyst reports have concluded that despite the acknowledged potential benefits of IoT, currently the IoT technology we have as of today simply can't yet do what the manufacturers want. So is this just another case of PR hype sort of overtaking technological ability? Is it simply too soon for IoT? And if it isn't, how can you at Jasper prove the value of IoT investment to your clients and to your customers?
Sure. So there is a certain amount of sort of traversing the hype cycle, if you will. And undoubtedly the last few years we've seen that hype cycle go into full swing. I think as Gartner likes to call the steady state, if you will, where you have sort of the plateau of productivity, I think we're starting to see that. And as it may not be as widespread as we would all like it to be, but I think that the mainstream industries, particularly manufacturing industries, are seeing the tangible benefits. And we've gotten past this connected toothbrush era, and I think we're now at a point where a company like GE sees the value in what they call the industrial IoT, and essentially be able to at the very least, again, provide those devices with connectivity so that they can in fact take advantage of all of the capabilities that are outside of that device in the cloud, for example. And so, we're certainly seeing industrial companies. A good example is ABB, for example, which manufactures very sophisticated robotic arms.
Yeah.
And what they're finding is that, first of all, these robotic arms are distributed all over the world, including in places like China. And just having the visibility into those devices, those robotic instruments, how they're operating, what they are doing at any given time alone is of valuable importance to them. So they're basically able to now make sure that the remote diagnostics and the servicing of those very expensive assets is done in a very cost-effective manner. And then the second part is that they're also seeing, and we can say this about a lot of manufacturers, is that they're moving from this selling a product into essentially selling a service. So selling a product as a service. So both in the example of both GE as well as ABB, they're starting to find new business models where they don't just sell that device for $100,000, $500,000, or in cases of GE, several $1 million, but essentially selling it as a service so that it's used on a pay-per-use basis. So they're finding different innovative ways of doing it. So both in terms of making sure that the operational efficiencies of managing devices remotely, as well as finding new ways of monetizing these products, as a service, are things that we're very, very look very promising to us, and I think this is something that is going to pervade the industry as we move forward.
Thank you. Let's have a look at something else now, which is the fact that IoT's value is largely predicated on asset management. And by that I mean the monitoring of things, of processes, operations in real time, and so on. But surely you need a wealth of historic data if an IoT system, service, or application is ever going to be able to foretell and to forewarn when a system's failure or a breakdown or a problem is likely to be encountered. And that requires predictive analysis. And you can't predict without a basis to predict on, having reference to an historic pattern and reference and so on. What's your take on that? Is it possible to draw a line and begin from ground up, as it were?
I don't think that that's necessary. I think that there are certainly, when you look at the application of big data, there is a certain amount of transient value to that data. So, being able to get the data, apply the patterns and the algorithms that you've derived from historical data is certainly important. And so to your point about, if you don't have that historical data, how do you actually derive that? And I would say, most companies have, if they've been in business long enough, they have a repository of information.
Sure.
The challenge for them is it's not stored in a way where it's accessible to the big data engine that can run the algorithms.
Yeah.
So there is a certain amount of sort of at the initial stage of the due diligence that enterprises need to do to collect and convert that data into an infrastructure that is capable of managing kind of the big data dynamics.
Sure.
But that's not to say that a company that builds a pump that's put out in a farm or a factory somewhere is not able to take data that is collecting in real time and look at certain patterns that it knows based on its empirical evidence from before that there's something that could potentially go wrong with it. So yeah. I don't think it's a precursor. I don't think it's a prerequisite to have a lot of that historical data in a big data warehouse storage. I think that's certainly going to be of much more value once you have that in that type of an infrastructure to make it even more predictive and even more valuable. But I think there's certainly enough there to get started for a lot of enterprises.
Thank you. Final question to you, and then you can go and have lunch like everybody else. There's a lot of speculation in the industry and the media about 5G and the use of 5G technology to enable and grow the connectivity of the Internet of Things. And now at Jasper, you're pushing the notion of IoT as a service. What does that mean? What does it involve? And can one network ever possibly cope and manage all IoT needs?
So let me address that in sort of two parts. One is, the notion of 5G, and I think a lot of it, obviously, a lot of the discussion and talk around it probably comes from the vendor community, from us, from the people in this room.
Yeah.
And part of that is just kind of moving the ball forward and moving the industry along. I think that there is certainly a lot of recognition in the broader telecom and larger ecosystem that IoT is a special use case, and having networks that are optimized for smartphones and tablets is not going to be optimal for a device that's only transmitting a kilobyte of data per month, periodically, maybe once a day or once a month even.
Sure.
So I think there's a recognition that that there needs to be some evolution of the network to allow these types of devices also to connect in an economical and optimal way. And so I think we see a lot of activities, even in the 4G space. Recently, the 3GPP organization came out with a statement that they are going to standardize on LTE NB, narrowband LTE. So even within the 4G spectrum, if you will, we're already seeing a renewed effort to address kind of the IoT use cases. So I don't think it's necessarily a matter of let's all wait until 5G for this to happen. In fact, people have been deploying machine-to-machine and IoT services on 2G, 3G, and now increasingly we're starting to see them adopt LTE. So I think that's one part of the question that you asked. In terms of what it means for us for when we say IoT as a service, our thesis at Jasper is that the Internet of Things isn't really about things per se. It's about making them into services. You take an example like a connected car. GM used to sell a thing, a product, which was a car.
Yep.
And now those cars are more often than not connected through 3G, LTE, and they're providing all sorts of services like Wi-Fi hotspots in the car, infotainment services, real-time safety and diagnostic services. And so now GM is in the service business, not necessarily selling a product, but selling a service to their consumers. And that's really what we mean when we say IoT as a service. And I think, certainly the telecom community has a lot to contribute there because, the telecom community has been in the service business for the longest time, and they can certainly contribute a lot to enterprises who are also trying to make that transformation.
Okay. Sanjay Khatri, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much.